My very first memory of the Daytona 500 was a crazy one. We left St. Louis, and it was obviously my mom and dad, Russ and Judy, my brothers, Rusty and Mike, and we drove down there. And for some reason, I didn't have tickets to the Daytona 500. So I think me and my mom stayed back at the hotel and we were watching it on TV. And it was the year that some drivers wrecked out and Benny Parsons won the race in the Kings Road, number 72. But I was just a kid, and I was just happy we were going to Florida. But boy, that was a special memory, just a trip going down there.
So you and your two brothers started racing, and Rusty was the first one to break into the Sprint Cup Series. Mm-hmm. What was it like being at the Daytona 500 as he was a rookie?
It was brutal on me because I remember we were attempting to run the Daytona 500. Rusty was driving the number 72 red and white. I think it was sponsored by Ramada Inn, or I forgot who the sponsor was. All I know is Rusty was running great. He was coming off of turn 2, running in the top 5, and at that time, you know, it was the twin 125s. And all of a sudden, I remember the announcer just getting real loud, and Rusty Wallace is flipping down the back straightaway. And it had been raining in Daytona all that week. So as Rusty was flipping, he was flipping through the grass. And right away, I just had enough presence to run to the infield care center by myself and waited for the ambulance. And when I looked in the ambulance, you know, I'm hyperactive, so I'm looking, you know, I'm running, looking in the ambulance, and there's Rusty, and all I see was red everywhere. And my first thought is, my brother Rusty is dead. He's covered in blood. Well, lo and behold, and thank God, he was wearing a red fire suit. But he had all this sand. Remember I told you about the rain all week? He had all this sand that came in the race car. And Rusty was covered in sand with just a little bit of that red fire suit poking through, making me believe for a moment that my brother's dead. He's covered in blood. And I learned so much from Rusty. You know, he was sitting there like this on the gurney, and he just took his eyes and he looked at me, you know, and he turned out okay. But years later, Rusty taught me so many life lessons. Like when things go bad, take your body, calm down, know you're hurt, breathe. And that's what Rusty was practicing at that time. Because, you know, I wanted him to say, I'm okay, brother, but he was staying calm, because our first attempt at the Daytona 500 didn't go well, you know, because we wrecked out, we didn't make it.
Rusty had a few years' experience on you. You're the younger brother, but then it was your time to shine. Yeah. It was, I think, 1993, right? Your first ever Daytona 500. Explain that.
Well, you know, I had been to Daytona as a race car driver in what was then called the Busch Series. Now it's called the Xfinity Series. And 1991, let's go back there. 1991, I go down there for the very first time as a race car driver in Wallace Racing. So my brother Rusty owned my car. We sit on the pole. We were the fastest car, and we finished 10th. That was in 91. So now you fast forward, and I become a Sprint Cup race car driver. At that time, it was called Winston Cup. You know, that was an incredible time because I was so nervous that I would not make the Daytona 500. When you go back in the 90s, 60 cars would show up for 36, 38 spots. Nowadays, everybody's pretty much guaranteed in these races. So when I started, you could very easily miss the race. And I remember going down there driving for Felix Sabates. My car was number 40, sponsored by Dirt Devil Vacuum Cleaners. And I knew I had to finish in the top 16 in the twin 125 qualifying race. And I remembered Rusty wrecking out years before that. And I did good. I finished, I think, 14th or 15th. Made the Daytona 500. I think that was on a Wednesday or a Thursday, and one of the biggest dreams come true of my life. Finished 23rd, and that was the start of my Cup career.
Wow. Did Rusty or Mike, did they kind of prep you for the Daytona 500? Did they tell you kind of what to expect, or how to approach a turn, or kind of how to calm yourself during this, you know, the long Daytona 500 race?
You know, I learned a lot of lessons from a lot of great drivers. You know, Dale Earnhardt gave me my very first ride in NASCAR. It was 1987. I ran Martinsville, Virginia. finished 12th in Dale Earnhardt's number 8 GM Goodwrench Chevrolet. It was, at that time, it was a nationwide car. And so Dale taught me a lot. Of course, Dick Trickle taught me a lot. My brother Rusty, Mark Martin. I remember me and Mark Martin together before my first Daytona 500. And Mark said, Herman, that's my nickname, he says, your goal should be to finish in the top 20 in the Daytona 500. So I finished 23rd. But that calmed my nerves. Because, you know, when you're a Wallace and your dad, Russ, won everything, and my mom won powder puff races, and then Rusty was doing good, Mike was doing good, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm the last Wallace. I got to fight for the win, and it was just unrealistic at that time. So Mark Martin really calmed my nerves by just saying your goal should be just a top 20.
So when you're on the super speedways like Talladega or the Daytona 500 or even the summer race, the Daytona, how much do you think is in your control based on how the speed you're going, the restrictor plate, how much you have to draft? How much is in your control as a driver?
You know, as a race car driver, when you go to Daytona or you go to Talladega, and the very first thing you're thinking when you go down there is, I have to have a fast race car. It's one of the rare racetracks that you go to that you want a fast race car. You need a fast race car, because when you hold it wide open at Daytona, that's all it has. There's nothing you can do except draft off of other drivers. So, you know, when you go down there, that's all that's in your mind. And if you don't have a fast race car, you can't control your destiny. Now, if you have a fast race car, you go up front, you look in the mirror, and you're laughing at everybody. They're following me. And the great Dale Earnhardt and Dale Jr. and Jeff Gordon, not just were they great race car drivers, but nobody could pass them. So, you know, Dale Earnhardt told me one time, I'll never forget it. I said, Earnhardt, I said, you just came from the back to the front in that Budweiser shootout. You kept passing everybody. The great Earnhardt told me, when you have a fast horse, you ride it until it breaks its foot. So you can only do so much at Daytona and Talladega with a slow car.
Right.
You're not in control.
Yeah, that's true. Kenny Wallace.
Thank you. Hi, I'm NASCAR driver and Fox Sports TV analyst, Kenny Wallace. Now, you heard from my Daytona 500 stories. We want to hear yours, especially on social network. Use hashtag MyFirst500. Send it in. We can't wait to hear your story.
We're living in the fast